Some people might think that Jesus is mean because he doesn't mess around. He doesn't try to soften what he's about to say. He doesn't say, listen, I hope you don't take this the wrong way. Jesus just comes out and he says, truth, here it is, deal with it. And that seems to be true in all of the Gospels. Everywhere I see the words of Jesus, he just says what he needs to say and then gets on with his ministry. So if we just read the red letters here in the book here, we might get the impression that Jesus doesn't care about anybody's feelings. He's just, here it is, here's the truth, deal with it, and let's get on with what we're doing. And I don't know if that's the case. I don't think Jesus is mean, but when you think about how he has divided people up, he said, these people are going over here, these people are going this way, these people are going to believe, these people are not. He's pretty direct. He just says what's true. And I think what happens is we take that and we say, well, that hurts my ears. I don't know that I want to hear anything that direct. And we try to soften it. But that's never the intention of Jesus. Jesus is about speaking the truth. And if he has to speak the truth, he does it. Now, he does begin to speak in parables here. So I thought there was a little softening. So instead of saying that some people are going to believe and then an hour later they're not going to believe, they're going to get all excited and then they're going to fall over dead, he talks about the little plant. I thought that was kind of, but he's being very direct. He's saying some are going to rise up, some are going to fall over, some are going to believe, some are not going to believe. So he's still being equally direct. So we take those things, the things that Jesus speaks very directly, and I find that these are not the things that we share with people, right? These are not the truths that we come out and say, listen, let me tell you about Jesus. You're going to believe, and then you're going to fall over dead. It doesn't work. We don't do it. We tend to go towards the positive promises, don't we? We find those good things, those really nice things that Jesus says, and then we build our approach around that. So John 11, we've all heard this, right? I am the resurrection and the life. Great promise. Jesus is speaking, he's being direct, but he's being very kind. He's got this enormous promise for us. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Now, those are red letters, they're very direct, but they're a great promise. Those are the kind of things that we like to share with people. A little bit further on in John, what does he say? Don't let your hearts be troubled. Don't let your hearts be troubled. Don't worry. I'm going to go and prepare a place for you. Even though you can't come with me right now, I'm going to go and make sure everything is good for you. Those are the kind of things we like to hear. We love to hear those promises. Even I was thinking when he gives the great commandment, he says, listen, I'm sending you out on this never-ending mission. And it's going to be near impossible, and you're going to struggle, and all this. He gives all these marching orders, but at the end he says, but I will be with you always. So you have nothing to fear. I think those are great promises. Those are the kind of things that we want to hang on to. So when we get into the red letters here, those are the things we share with people. The downside of that is that if that's all we share, we give people a false impression. You see, when we share just the positive words of Jesus, when we evangelize that way, when we share our faith with people that way, what happens is we can sometimes give a false impression that once you become a Christian, it's all like cupcakes and unicorns after that. Everything is just magically wonderful. You'll never be sick again. Wrong. You'll never be sick again. You'll never have any kind of struggle or travail. Nothing. It's just going to be gold. Now, some of you have been Christians longer than I've been alive. Is that true? No, we know that to be a fact, that Christians get sick and Christians run into trouble and Christians have struggle in their faith and all these things. So we want to make sure that we don't give a false impression. We want to be real like Jesus is real. We want to say, trouble's coming your way. Trouble is coming into your life, and it's okay. That's a good thing. Trouble's going to come your way. You're going to struggle. You're going to get sick. Some people are going to die, and that's okay. Now, that sounds weird. That sounds like not what we want to tell people, but we do. We want to model ourselves after Jesus. We want to be direct, kind, but loving and direct, and share the truth in the same way that he does. We look forward to the promise of the new heavens and the earth, right? We look forward to that promise of no more tears, no more sickness, none of that stuff. But the reality of that is that's on the other side. That's on the other side of eternity. You and I and all the people that we're going to share the good news with are going to exist for the rest of our lives on this side of eternity. And our reality is a little bit more harsh. So when we speak directly, we want to read all of the red words, even if they seem to be challenging. Even when Jesus is talking about the 4 little seeds, and one doesn't make it, one makes it all the way, and a couple are in between there. All truth, all direct, all things that people need to know. There are other things that Jesus says that are direct and are things that we want to share to people, even though we usually don't. We read a couple of verses in John. How about John 15:18? If the world hates you, keep in mind that they hated me first. This is what Jesus says to people. If the world hates you, it's because they hate me. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen that in the 4 Spiritual Laws booklet that people had. No, that's not in there. We don't tell people that because we are afraid that they're going to take it wrong, that they're going to hear it wrong, and that they're going to turn away from Jesus. But remember, he's just telling the truth. He's just saying, this is reality. This is what life is going to be all about. In Matthew 10, he says this, brother will betray brother, and a father his child. Children will rebel against their parents and have them put to death. You will be hated by everyone because of me. Now, how's that for a pitch? How's that for, let me tell you about my Savior Jesus? He says this, you will be hated because of me. Now, I see your faces that maybe that wasn't the most popular verse I could have pulled out here. But you know what? When Jesus says that to you, that's a good thing. When trouble comes your way, it's a good thing. When struggle is in your life, that's a good thing. And the reason that's a good thing is because it gives you an opportunity that you wouldn't otherwise have to evaluate the quality of your faith, to look at the depth of your faith, to ensure that you are not that little seedling that sprouted up, and as soon as the sun hits it, you begin to wilt away. You want to know that you were the seed that found fertile ground. And although you may be struggling amongst the tares, although you may not have produced the harvest just yet, you want to know that when trouble comes your way, you still continue to thrive, you still continue to grow, you still continue to try to produce fruit. That's why Jesus speaks directly. That's why it's a good thing when trouble comes your way, because it's only then that you have a realistic chance of evaluating the depth and the quality of your belief in Jesus and his promises. So if trouble coming your way is a good thing, the little story that we're going to read in Mark today kind of brings all that together. So we're going to go to the very end of chapter 4 in Mark. Maybe. You've all seen this painting before, haven't you? Rembrandt, Jesus in the Storm. You know where you can go see this painting, the real one? Yeah, nobody does, because it was stolen, I want to say in the early 2000s, but don't quote me there. Somebody went into an art museum in Boston, cut this picture out of its frame, and it has disappeared. It has not been seen ever since it was stolen. This and a bunch of other artworks, all stolen in one night at this museum. If you ever get to this museum, I can't remember the name of it, but the empty frames are on the wall to show you where the paintings existed. So it'd be something to look at, I suppose. Anyway, this is Jesus on the Sea of Galilee with his disciples. And of course, it's a little dark, but Jesus is having a nap right here at the bow of the boat. Hey, Jesus is sound asleep. And this is the story that Mark is going to tell us. It begins here in verse 35. That day when evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. So he has been ministering. This is read to be at the end of the day when Jesus is teaching in parables. So he has been teaching all these stories all day. You remember the number of people that have gathered around him, pushing on him, and then he had pulled away from the shore to kind of get some space there. So Jesus is exhausted. He said, let's get away from the crowd. Let's go to the other side of the lake. So they all jump in these little fishing boats and they set off. No sooner do they get out there than this storm rises up here. In verse 37 it says, "A furious squall came up and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern." I said bow, I'm sorry. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. So this storm has come up, and this is not just, a couple of waves here. This is waves over the edge of the boat here. This is wind that is tearing the sails apart. This is a storm that is threatening to capsize this boat. And you say, well, what's the big deal? This is a bunch of fishermen. They'll be fine. Swimming was not a recreational activity in this day and age. So going over the edge of this boat was not, they were just going to swim back. They might have dog paddled back, but most likely they were going to drown. And so you can see him hanging on for dear life, trying to survive this storm. And there's Jesus, sound asleep on his cushion at the back of the boat. Now, if you looked at that, if you looked at your leader, and the worst thing you can imagine is happening to you, and he's sound asleep, what's going to go through your head? You're going to begin to question things, aren't you? No matter how direct he's been with you, no matter how much truth he has explained to you, his actions don't appear to line up with the concern that you think that he should have. And this is apparently what's going on with the disciples here. So where were we? Jesus was in the stern sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Now, I'm sorry, I read it in English here, and that's kind of how it reads here. This is not, "Hey, Jesus, can you wake?" No. This is them getting over Jesus and screaming at him. "Jesus, wake up! Like, can't you see the storm around us? Aren't you aware that we are about to go under here?" And look what they say to him. "Jesus, teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Uh-oh. Boy, doesn't that sound familiar? A little trouble comes our way. And what's the first thing we're tempted to say? Why me? Why are you bringing this my way? Hey, wait a minute, Jesus, wake up. Why am I sick? Hey, Jesus, I'm your guy. How come I'm having this kind of trouble? Hey, Jesus, why are you bringing family trouble into my life? Don't you care? Now, we'll stop there because you could do that all day long with the things that we initially emote when something bad comes our way. See, when something bad comes into our life, the first thing is, I don't want this. I don't want this kind of trouble. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to be sick. I don't want to be poor. I don't want to be struggling, whatever it is. I don't want any of this. And as strong followers in Jesus, our finger immediately goes out because we've been raised on the promises. Everything's going to be great. I'll be with you always. I'm going to look after you. The angels in heaven sing your name. All this stuff. But the reality is, we live on this side, don't we? We live on this side of the new heavens and the earth. We live in the fallenness. We wade around in the fallenness every day. And so our reality is that sickness does come our way. Financial struggle does come our way. Family problems do rise up. That's the reality in which we live. And it's not that Jesus doesn't care. It's that Jesus has formed you to handle the problem differently. You see, Jesus knows exactly what's going on. Jesus has every confidence that if it was his Father's plan that that boat go all the way to the bottom of the Galilee, okay, that's just fine. But the problem is his guys weren't there yet. Think about this. His guys have seen him heal people. Like, just reach out and touch him, and these people are healed. He has seen Jesus drive demons out. They have seen Jesus confront the leadership. They have seen the people that Jesus has called. They have seen all of this. They have listened to his teaching. They have sat at his feet like little puppies and just absorbed every single thing that he has said. And then, boom, the second something hard comes into their life, what happens? The switch goes off. They forget what Jesus has taught them, and they say, dude, don't you care that we're about to drown? The reason that is so powerful is because we can all see ourselves there. At one point or another in life, hopefully not too many, but maybe at multiple points in life, we have forgotten who Jesus is, Lord of all. I think we just sang that like 20 times. Lord of all. We forget that. We think he's Lord of his church and he's Lord of really cool stuff, but certainly he's not Lord of the head cold or something, because if he was, he would take care of this. He would make it go away. But the reality is that he is Lord over all. And in that, Lord over finance, Lord over family, Lord over everything that goes on, in that we can have confidence that whatever is happening to us, around us, as a part of us, whatever is happening is exactly what God would have happen. And we don't have to fear it. We don't have to get bound up and freaking out like the disciples do. So Jesus gets up. They have interrupted his nap. He gets up and he rebukes the wind and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." And then the storm gradually subsides. Another hour or two of these kind of waves, and then it finally rided out. Except that's not what it says. It says, then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. How many of us would like to be able to do that on one of those days, where the buildings are falling over and you just stop? That would be kind of cool. But Jesus is exhibiting something they have never seen before. They can sort of understand the healing. They can sort of get the idea of him being able to cast out demons. But he stood up and he spoke to the wind and the waves. Things nobody can touch. Things nobody can make happen. And Jesus stood up and said, "Quiet, be still." And they instantly obeyed. Talk about putting your foot in your mouth, right? 2 seconds prior, they were all pointing their finger at him, saying, "Don't you care if we drown?" And so Jesus stands up and he says, "Let me show you how much I care about your drowning. Be still." And the waves and the wind obey him. The disciples have just moved into a whole other era of their relationship with Jesus. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" When we point our fingers, do we hear Jesus asking us, "You still have no faith? You have been one of my sons or daughters for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 70, 100 years?" I think I covered everybody. You've been my son, my daughter. You have heard my Father's word speak week after week. You have embedded yourself in it. And still you have fear when trouble comes your way. I've promised to be with you. I've promised to walk with you through it. I promise that no matter what you face, I will never forsake you. Jesus has promised all of these things. And yet, we forget. And that's why trouble's a good thing. That's why trouble coming into our life is a good thing, because it gives us that moment. Maybe a long one, maybe a short one, but that moment where we can stop and say, "Do I have the faith to deal with this? Do I have sufficient trust in the promises of Jesus Christ to be able to face whatever this enormous hurdle is, whatever this small problem is, whatever it is, whatever doubt I have, whatever moment of lack of faith do I have enough trust in Jesus Christ? Have I developed sufficiently as a disciple so that no matter what comes my way, I can trust in Jesus Christ, the Lord of all?" I love the very end of this. They were terrified. They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." I think they call that one of those self-answering questions, because by recognizing that he has control over everything, he is Lord over everything, they know exactly who he is now. There's no question. Jesus is not just some guy with magic powers. He is Lord over every single thing. When that kind of storm, when a little storm, whatever it is, comes into our life, that's a good thing, because it gives us that moment to set very clear before us who Jesus is, who exactly Jesus is to us. You've probably heard this little passage here, and this passage is in the three synoptic gospels. You've probably heard this and been tempted to interpret it in terms of Jesus will be with us and calm the storms of our life. Bless you. But you've all also lived long enough to know that that's not true, is it? Jesus does not always stand up in the storms of our life and go, "Peace, be still." Does he? Sometimes what Jesus does in the middle of the storm is say, "Trust me. Trust me. I'll ride this out with you. Trust me. No matter how high the waves get, no matter how bad the wind is, no matter how much seawater you seem to be sucking in, trust me." Jesus doesn't automatically calm every storm. Jesus doesn't show up and fix every problem. Jesus says, "Trust me that I am the Lord of the storm. Trust me that in the overall scope of all of history, this is exactly where you should be, what you should be experiencing, and what comes out of it is precisely what God intends to come out of it." So Jesus doesn't stand up and say, "Let me fix every single issue in your life. Trust me to go through it with you. Trust me, even if it seems like I'm asleep. Trust me." And sometimes he will stand up and fix everything, and sometimes he will not. Mark's going to continue with this idea of Jesus being Lord of all with a little series of stories. And the purpose is always, if Jesus is Lord over the weather, and he's Lord over your future, and he's Lord over every trouble and travail, then you can trust him here, you can trust him there, you can trust him everywhere. He is Lord over all things. And that's who we want to say that Jesus is. Jesus was not just some guy that showed up sometime in history, went to the cross, atoned for your sins, and then that's that. Jesus is Lord over everything. He is Lord over this moment. He is Lord over what's going to happen this afternoon. He is Lord over what will happen for the rest of history. Jesus is Lord of all. When you think about the worst thing that you can imagine happening in your life, whatever that might be, if you can imagine that, and then get that pictured in your mind, and then ask yourself, does Jesus care about this? Well, your answer is going to be, well, yeah, he cares about this. A better question would be, is Jesus Lord over this worst thing that I could possibly imagine? And the answer again is yes, Jesus is Lord over all. When we come to understand that, when we come to say that is who Jesus is, he is Lord of all and Savior. That's who Jesus is. That's who I have put my full faith and trust in. That is who I follow. That's whose spirit guides me and who I listen to. That is who I model my life after. That is who we want to say that Jesus is, because that is the Jesus that gives us the peace and the calm and the joy that we're supposed to have, the contentment despite the circumstances, the joy despite the trouble that might be a part of our life. That's the Jesus that brings that stuff about. And when we say, this is who Jesus is, look what happens. The next time we look out on the horizon and the storm clouds start to form, we start to see them gray clouds out there in our life, and we start to say, uh-oh, trouble's coming. Instead of saying, I got to get away from this trouble, I got to avoid this trouble. If Jesus really loved me, he wouldn't bring this trouble in him, whatever. No. We can walk right into the storm. We can walk right into whatever is the most challenging thing you can think of. We can walk straight on in, trusting in all the promises where Jesus says, I'll go with you. I will be with you always. I will not forsake you. All of those things go with us when Jesus is Lord over all. That storm that you're going to see off on the horizon, that's just reality. That's life. That's going to continue to be life. That's our life until the end of days. And it is true for Christians and non-Christians alike. Here's the difference. The non-Christian has no hope to hang on to. They see trouble coming and they do their best to avoid it. And when it hits them, they have no way of knowing why it's happening, what the outcome is going to be, whatever. They are just filled with questions and doubt and worry and concern. And listen, their joy is based upon their well-being. Their joy is based upon how good they feel. Trouble comes, they don't feel good. Their joy vanishes instantly. But the Christian, the believer in Jesus, who is Lord over everything, has nothing but hope. No matter how high the waves, no matter how fierce the wind, the Christian has nothing but hope because Jesus is the Lord of those waves. He is the Lord of that wind. He is the Lord of the storm. When Jesus said, "Peace, be still," when he lifted his hands up to that storm, he is clearly the Lord over that. And when that storm that we're watching come over the horizon, when that comes into our life, Jesus he might actually stand up in front of that storm and say, "Peace, be still." And it may stop. But more likely what he's going to do is Jesus going to reach his hands out towards your soul. He's going to reach his hands out towards your heart and say, "Peace, be still. I'm Lord over this trouble. I'm Lord over this storm. I'm Lord over everything." He's going to reach out to your soul and say, "Peace, be still." Celebrate the storm. Celebrate the rain. Enjoy the wind. Look for trouble. Trust in the Lord of the waves. Trust in the Lord of the storm, the Lord of the wind. Trust in the Savior of your life, of your soul, of your eternity. Amen?